Could it be? Is Howlermouse shooting 2 videos in a 24-hour period? Well, yes, he is. The reason I'm putting up 2 videos real quick, I'm shooting this one on June 14th. I did one early this morning because I couldn't sleep. Still haven't been to bed. But basically, I went on a road trip here for a couple days. It's going to consist of 2 days and 1 night. It's work related. The rest is mine. Kind of got an idea of where I might go and stuff. Depending on where I go, maybe I'll shoot a video while I'm there. Maybe not. But basically, I got a little ghost in my head that seems to be creeping up here and there. And the best way to exorcise a ghost is to pretty much, get out of the house. And you can't sit around waiting on a phone call you're never promised, man. So I'm get out and live a little life and stuff, right? And with that said and everything like that, I had the urge to shoot this video about John Byrne's Superman. I'm going to be showing Action Comics and a mix of other stuff here. Don't want to make a long video. People always say that. But basically what happened was I read read some DC Rebirth books, and the Superman one was really good. The Rebirth books, they all seem to be going in the right direction that I've read. And basically what happens is that we got the DC 52 Superman taken over at front and center after kind of being in the background there for a while. And they killed the DC 52 Supermans. No spoiler alert on that. Sorry. And but basically what I was kind of pumped about is that this is John Byrne's Superman is back. This is the one that started in '86 and continued on, and they brought him back. Is what has happened. Even going on, coming up, 30 years later. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. So basically what happened was, and that was really my Superman. My favorite Superman is the 60s Silver Age Superman. I love all that shit. I love stories with Jor-El. I like Kandor with Nightwing and Flamebird. I like the jeweled forest of Krypton, and I just love all that stuff. Sorry, man. Comet, Streaky, Beepo, the Super Turtle, Bizarro, I like all that stuff. That was my Superman. Ant heads and lion heads and just crazy stuff. All that Silver Age crap. But anyway, what happened is that DC, after 50 years of being in business, decided it was time to simplify their universes into one universe and get a continuity going and revamp stuff. And yes, I have the Crisis on Infinite Earths that I bought as a kid off the racks and stuff are all signed by George Perez and Marv Wolfman. And that's the Golden Age Superman in issue 1 of Crisis, but this is where they took all their multiverse and they made them into one, and they started pointing out that, they killed Supergirl, man, because they were wanting to get back to making Superman more of a rarity. He's the lone Kryptonian. He kind of, a planet blew up and there was all these Kryptonians floating around in the Phantom Zone and in Kandor, and he just wasn't unique, so they wanted to go back to being unique. And to give them credit, Alan Moore more or less threatened, I don't know who it was, Dick Giordano or someone like somebody higher up. He threatened somebody, and they gave, before the revamp, they gave, our Silver Age Superman quite a send-off. Alan Moore came in and did the story, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And Superman 423 and Action Comics 583. 2-part story. Kurt Swan, Alan Moore, George Perez, I think Murphy Anderson, Kurt Schaffenberger came in there, did some of the inks and stuff. But, Alan Moore tied everything up and gave our Superman of the Silver Age and the Copper Age and everything like that quite a send-off, It was really nice. Yes, I have 2. I love this story. And so when they came in, John Byrne came in, and like I said, I'm doing the Action Comics, and there was the Man of Steel miniseries. That was a bi-weekly event that kind of put Superman, kind of showed how Superman became Superman. There was no Superboy, and Clark Kent played football, and it made him more human. And what John Byrne actually did is he went back to what Superman was when he was just able to jump instead of fly and things like that. Ma and Pa Kent were still alive, and I'm not going to get into the whole history of Superman, but the Kents died because Superboy went to a jungle or something and brought back like some kind of disease from the jungle and ended up killing the Kents. Yes, it was something like that, spores or something, right? And Action Comics, when it came out, John Byrne did the miniseries, and then he did 3 other series: World of Krypton, World of Smallville, World of Metropolis, and fleshed out and updated, Superman's whole, little pocket of the DC world and all the cast and everything, and kind of redefined, broke up the world's finest team by having Superman and Batman not really liking each other and stuff. But Superman had another title before the Crisis kind of wiped all that out and stuff. He had DC Comics Presents, which was just fantastic. Yes, I have 2 of these. This is Alan Moore's Swamp Thing with Superman, a classic. And Action Comics became sort of the replacement for DC Comics Presents. You had Adventures of Superman, which took over the numbering from the original Superman. That was by Marv Wolfman and Jerry Ordway. Superman got a new #1, and Action Comics picked right up at 584. Make sure I'm telling you this right. And what was really cool about it is when this came out, I got mine. We got John Byrne. Now, you got to understand, okay, first issue of Action Comics, Teen Titans are in them, okay? And now that I've gotten older and kind of realized what they did, the story was sort of underwhelming for me for this to be the event. But I started picking up on things. Of course, it's kind of underwhelming because Superman, the Man of Steel series, the miniseries that introduced John Byrne's Superman, kind of caught him up to today. So it's kind of like business as usual. Superman's already in the DC universe. He's been around. So John Byrne kind of, in my opinion, did it to where it was like, hey, the series, we're picking up after what could have been a series before this. Superman's always been like this, thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths and stuff. And he's a weaker Superman, a little bit depowered. Byrne brought in concepts he brought up at another time. I'll get into that too in a video with another character at Marvel about Superman's strength actually being kind of a telekinesis, and his invulnerability kind of stems from that telekinesis that he has. And anything that's skin tight will be invulnerable, and having a ragged, torn up cape and stuff adds to the drama and everything. So there's a lot of things that were mildly changed. A lot of people complained, said he marveled it up. But the thing about having the Teen Titans pop up with John Byrne drawing them is that you got to understand about 6 years before this, give or take a few years, John Byrne came on and did the classic team of Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin on the Uncanny X-Men. And you had the Dark Phoenix saga, and you had Tales of Future Past and Prometheus and all this great stuff. And then the Titans came out by Marv Wolfman. The Teen Titans, the new Teen Titans, came out by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, and those freaking books were neck to neck, where they ended up having a crossover around 82. Chris Claremont wrote and Walt Simonson did. So all of a sudden, you've got these superstar X-Men artist drawing the Titans, the enemy back then, right? So yeah, it was kind of cool. It was nice to be in there. I was, digging some of the aesthetics that Byrne had put in there. The Superman S was a little bit bigger. There's more of a personality to Superman. Here he is with the Phantom Stranger, which was just a fantastic, creepy story. Brought in horror and stuff. And with the 3 titles that was going on, every now and then, there's people who have actually taken all of Byrne's Superman and tried to put him into a continuity, a way you're supposed to read every book that he had done to get a loose continuity and stuff. But every now and then it was just a flat out story. And after Crisis, they came out with a Legends series, and they crossed over in the titles and they were numbered. And these were the ones where I went freaking ape shit, man. Brought in Kirby's New Gods and stuff. And you had on Superman #3, where the story started, you had Terry Austin on there with John Byrne, with Darkseid and all this stuff going on. And Superman ended up on Apocalypse with sort of like an amnesia, and he ended up becoming a warrior for Darkseid on Apocalypse, and he was just freaking killing things left and right. He became, it's quite a story. And it cultivated. It ended up dovetailing into Action Comics number 586, man. And I really hope this shows up even with this freaking glare, man. because like I read the shit out of this one, man. This thing is all beat up and dirty. I mean, this was mine. I really need to upgrade it, but I'll never get rid of this. I love when you can just like see where I've just read this thing over the years and stuff. Great stuff. And John Byrne was a huge fan of Kirby, influenced a lot of his art and stuff. So, you know, of course, we're going to get some Kirby characters. We got the demon in there. You know, these stories were very cool. It explored the whole concept of, you know, magic and stuff with Superman. And then where John Byrne came in was such a big superstar from a reader's point of view, it was kind of used to give some other books, ongoing books, a little rub. Because back in the 80s, you had a thing, and they're probably still around, probably carried over the 90s, but you had rabid fans of John Byrne who were considered, they were called Byrne victims. So whenever John Byrne would go to a title, it seems like sales went up something like 250,000 issues, maybe 25,000 issues. Should have looked the number up before I did this thing, you know. But yeah, so, you know, you get a little rub here. So, you know, Superman now, who is now unique, didn't join the Justice League. They're kind of keeping him into his books and stuff. They did the same thing with Wonder Woman. They were kind of taking the heavy hitters out of the Justice League and doing different things with them, with Keith Giffen and James DeMantis and stuff. But, you know, we have Hawkman number 10 with a little appearance of Superman there with the big diamond shield now and stuff, you know, like that. And that kind of came over here to finish up the story in the Shadow War, you know, here with Action Comics 588. And this is really where he kind of explored this new telekinesis concept of Superman, where it kind of stems from his body. Because they're in a ship, and Superman actually punches his hands into the floorboards because the ship gets damaged or something. And he's kind of using this telekinesis to fly the ship from the inside and exploring that some, you know, a little bit. And of course, John Byrne would have these stories kind of go somewhere else. You know, something happens to Superman in this one where he gets separated from Hawkman and stuff, and he ends up on the other side of the universe and just happens to find the Green Lantern Corps. And this is where, you know, John Byrne did a little short story in one of those Green Lantern Corps one-shots that you had back then. I should have grabbed it. But in this, John Byrne had a thing where he wanted to say that it was not a green light coming out of the rings. It was a green plasma. And I think John Byrne hung out with a sci-fi writer named Larry Niven. And Larry Niven was a person who, the first time I recognized that name was from the old Land of the Lost episodes from the 70s and stuff. So I don't know, for some reason, I always got the concept that when Byrne kind of explored sci-fi elements, I always kind of got the idea he might have been talking to Larry. I don't know. I think maybe they were neighbors. I don't know. It was the 80s, you know, everything was from a grapevine. And, you know, I've never understood the whole thing with DC and the Metal Men, man. They always want to keep them going. You know, great Silver Age concept, but Byrne came in there. But I love Kimmo. Kimmo, to me, is just a fantastic villain. I don't know why. He's just, I don't know. I want to see Kimmo fight Godzilla and stuff, but Kimmo takes the shape of Superman in this and stuff. I'm not going to explain who Kimmo is, okay? And then, like I said, every now and then they would have the stories kind of cross over through all the series. And this is where John Byrne had the seeds of Superman in his head. I recently, a couple years ago, ran across a story where DC were pretty much talking to Marvel to put out their books. And I heard that Byrne wanted Superman so bad, he went ahead and did some pages. And I think those ended up in Man of Steel or Superman #1. If I do those videos, I'll get them out. But anyway, he ended up doing an issue of Fantastic Four back in 82, yeah, 249 and 250, where he brought in the Gladiator. And the Gladiator is basically Marvel's Superman. And he also actually took the name from Gladiator, which was a pulp novel in the 20s that a lot of people feel like influenced Superman a whole lot. You know, that's the title of the book. I've got a video going way back on Superman to Gladiator to Superman. You can probably type that in with Howlermouse. And actually somebody from the foundation of that Gladiator, I can't remember the author, man, the estate, complimented the video. So, you know, old Howlermouse there. Anyway, and the whole idea is Reed Richards took this apart saying, how can this man lift up a building the way that, you know, Golden Age Superman used to do? The building would stay together and there was no pipes and stuff, but it's the Marvel Universe, so it's a bit more real. And Reed Richards was the one that figured out that it's sort of this telekinesis that kind of travels with him. So when Superman is lifting, or Gladiator is lifting things that should fall apart under their own weight, it's that telekinesis that's holding it together. And here's Superman number 8 that ties into this story. But what I love is look at those covers. You know, it's a throwback. And I love how he brought in the Legion of Superheroes, and each Legionnaire matches up with one of the Fantastic Four. For Invisible Girl, you got Invisible Kid. For the Thing, you have Block. For Reed Richards, you have Brainiac. And for the Human Torch, let me move my finger, the glare's not showing it, you know, messing them up, you have Sunboy. You know, it's just that was kind of cool, man. But the reason the Legion got brought in there is because there's this big continuity hole now, thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths. The whole Legion of Superheroes, 1,000 years in the future, were inspired by Superboy, but there is no Superboy. So they did a whole story leading up to where the Legion's confused. They are the reader. Like, how can everyone remember Superboy? He doesn't remember us. This is not Superman, you know, that we know and stuff. So they brought in, they did it. They had Superman and Superboy fighting and stuff. And I loved it, man, because it harkened back to like one of the first, my early days of reading, man. I remember, I think it was like DC Comics Presents number 13. I shook it out of the box, but it had Superboy versus Superman. Harkens back to DC Comics Presents, where we got Superboy Prime, Earth Prime and Superboy. All the way back to the Silver Age that I love, where you had, you know, red Kryptonite splitting up Superboy and Superman's a dick. Stuff like that. But it kind of explained where the Superboy came from and how it still makes the Legion of Superheroes relevant and stuff without messing up their history so much. But sadly, it ended like a scene out of Wrath of Khan, you know, where Spock died. You know, sorry, man, 34-year-old spoiler on that one. I mean, seriously, if you've seen the movie, it blew my mind because, you know, Superboy does die, and he's even in a casket like Spock's. It's even got an S on it. I mean, I know that stands for Superboy, but could it stand for Spock? I'm just kidding you. Great stuff, man. All right, so one of the other things that John Byrne did with all this was he turned around and he did some, it still got Comic Code approved, but he put in some sexuality to there that was very subtle. He had a character who I'll talk about in the future who was a lesbian. You know, this is the 80s. Now, you got to remember, it's very brave coming in, but he brought in some more of the new gods and stuff, and he ended up bringing up a character named Sleaze, who was so sleazy and his tastes were so sickening, they kicked him off of Apocalypse. And basically, we go into the world of porn. Now, what they did here is they write this whole story with the way people are reacting, that Superman did it. He made a porn with Big Barda, and Darkseid brings him the VHS tape, and he's watching it, but it's really her dancing. It's not a porn. Sleaze even has a thought bubble where he's sitting there like, I can't compel him. Sleaze can control people. And Sleaze can't, you know, Superman's got such a strong moral fiber, he can't get him to do the act. But the way the whole book is wrote and the way that everybody is reacting, it's there. You know, that's what was so cool. And this was also the beginning of my hate for Booster Gold that's popping up. Booster Gold was the first new hero after Crisis and stuff. You know, he got his own book and stuff. And I'll be damned if I didn't throw him in to the Superman. You know, there's another part of this, I don't have it, but, you know, it kind of gave the Booster Gold book a rub. You know, there's 2 damn Booster Golds on that cover. You know, give me a break, man. And then, you know, they harken back to the days of, like, Brave and the Bold, like, who was Batman teaming up with, and you get question marks, who could it be? Well, they also did that in this. And, you know, brought in a new character named Silver Banshee, who was badass. I loved how Byrne drew the skull paint on her and stuff, right? And we played around. We had the crossover he had to do with Millennium, which was awful, but he brought in the Spectre to do it and tied it in with Smallville and all this stuff. But what's really significant about the Spectre and Superman being together in this book is they're both created by Jerry Siegel, you know, so that's kind of cool. And then we have another kind of a throwback to the Silver Age, because this cover doesn't happen, but they bring in some classic Superman artists, and we go back to the days that Lois Lane and Lana Lang were all catty and all this stuff over Superman. He has to separate them. But there's a note that this doesn't happen, but this is the more mature and updated 80s kind of thing of Lana Lang and Lois Lane finally really meeting for the first time in the new continuity in Smallville, I think. You know, kind of like a little slice of life if you're a Superman fan. Then, of course, we got the big Checkmate #1 here. Superman and Checkmate, their first appearance. You know, if you watch the CW DC shows, you should know who Checkmate is. Krypton brought back the Metal Men. I guess he was tying up some loose ends and stuff. Played around with the concept of kryptonite. That was another thing. Kryptonite affected humans. The radiation of kryptonite worked so much slower on humans. It would automatically wipe Superman out and mess him up, but humans would also be affected over a long-term exposure. Lex Luthor lost his hand because he wore a kryptonite ring all the time to keep him at bay. And threw this in before the end here, man. But we also had Art Adams come in with a great little story about vampires that John Byrne wrote. Or getting Art Adams on there was pretty cool. But I think this is the story that the whole concept that made the story was what would happen is a vampire bit Superman because he's probably magic, supernatural. So he could probably bite Superman, but Superman is a walking solar solar. Gets his powers from the sun, the solar radiation. So he's a walking solar battery. Is what would happen. And of course, John Action 600, John Byrne entered the run, brought in George Perez, and they had been teasing Superman and Wonder Woman getting together here in the 80s and stuff. And this is also a throwback to some Silver Age giant 80-page Superman books and stuff, where they did stuff like this. We got a Bizarro over here to show you, to kind of compare, but I'm not going to jump over there. Anyway, this was a bunch of short stories with a bunch of great artists, and it kind of tied up a lot of loose ends. But it had a Mike Mignola story with Man-Bat. What happened was that when Krypton blew up, John Byrne used real physics and stuff. At least they're accurate at the time. I'm not a physicist, but when a planet blows up, it doesn't completely shatter and go away, man. It makes like an asteroid field that still kind of gives the illusion of a planet or something. It keeps its gravity. But that the radiation, the energy from the explosion just circled out and was traveling through the universe, and it took 50 years to reach Earth. So Earth is getting bathed in kryptonite radiation. Superman goes down into a cave, and Man-Bat is in there, and he tells Man-Bat to get help, and Man-Bat goes and gets a little help. He gets Hawkman. So Hawkman and Hawkgirl pop back up after being in Action Comics, and we get our story continued in Superman number 18 from 1988 with great Mike Mignola art, harkening back to the world of Krypton that he did. If you're following me here, I'll do that in another video. But we get a radiation dream sickness. They actually take him to where Krypton is, and he jumps out in a suit, but the radiation is so strong it's still getting him, and he has a fever dream of what would happen if the Kryptonians had all come to Earth. So that's it in a nutshell. Going by memory there and all that stuff that I usually do. So, I had a good time being a kid, getting those books and being part of something new and fresh. And now here it is 30 years later, and, they're still kind of going with that Superman. That's kind of cool. All right, guys. Have a great summer.